Live from Woburn. It's Tuesday afternoon. This is Bill Mullen. We have over 400 people signed up today. And as Sandy Cravens pointed out to me this morning, our Director of Education, they're not here to hear me, see me. They're here to hear the subject matter, which I completely disagree with. So I'm currently this minute imagining all of you applauding and yelling because I'm on your screen. Yeah, I love that story. Since we have 400 people, my boss had a script written for me to make sure I don't miss any salient points. So let me go over that right now. Hi, I'm GBAR Legal Counsel and Director of Risk Management, Bill Mullen. And welcome to our second GBAR Legal Live session this year. We've been offering this as a new member benefit, essentially bringing the GBAR brokerage counseling line directly to you. If you have any topics for the future that you'd like us to discuss, please share them with us after today's presentation during our follow-up survey about the meeting, and we'll try to add some of those topics if applicable. Our current topic today is a discussion about the lawsuits challenging MLS rules on buyer broker compensation and models, the many benefits of incorporating buyer representation into your regular business, and I'm going to share tips for presenting buyer agency representation agreements a little bit. We'd like this session to be interactive. So if you have a question, you need to go down to the bottom of your screen, press the raise your hand button, and that will bring you to the first page. We had over 400 people sign up, so I can't go from page to page and see people. So raise your hand on the, not physically, on the little bar down below. And where it says raise hand, and that will bring you to the first screen. I'll see you pop up and I'll be able to call on you. We know you probably have a lot of questions about today, and I'll see if I can answer some of them. While I'm excited about talking about this subject today, you need to really understand that I'm being Notre Dame somewhat. We don't have definitive answers yet, period. In fact, one of the main lawsuits started today. It's the Sitzer-Burnett suit, started yesterday in trial. NAR expects that to go for 3 weeks, and we'll probably have a verdict the week of November 16th, right around that time. I'd like to say to you, we'll be in a much better position at that time to know where we're going. But, we have the appeals process to the Court of Appeals and then to Supreme Court and yada, yada, yada. So truthfully, we're not going to have a definitive answer for probably a couple of years. But don't worry, today's discussion is going to be circle around how to prepare for that and where to go to be prepared when final decisions come up. I'd first like to recognize our president, Allison Sosha. Allison, you want to wave to everybody? I think you're on the first page. Do you raise hand thing to come to the first page in case you're not? There we go. And I thought I was told Jared Wilkes is going to be on the call. Our president-elect, Jared, if you're there, raise your hand also. If you're not, I have misinformation, but that's not a problem. All right. I believe that's the only executive board officers who are on today's call. If you are want to be recognized, do the raise hand thing and come to the first page, and I can recognize you. I'm going to try to share my screen right now. Kevin, you disabled share screening for me too. So while Kevin gets that fixed, Jared, there you are. Jared Wilk, who's our president-elect, who's just coming, president next year. Give everybody a wave, Jared. Okay. I'm going to try to share my screen to give you some information.
Yeah, it should be all set now.
I got it, Kev. Thank you. All right. So is it shared? Everybody have a screen? The screen you should be looking at is called Drive with NAR Podcast. No objections. I'll assume you see it. So this is a tool that NAR has out there for you to listen to, and they go through explaining to you how to turn it on in your car so you can actually listen to it while driving and so forth. And the first report right here is a special report on what's going on in the lawsuit that's currently being tried, started yesterday, the Sitzer Burnett case. I'm going to give you a little overview just so you kind of understand it, but I'm not going to get into the specifics. So the lawsuit is out of Missouri, and basically, sellers entered into a listing agreement with a company, and eventually sold the property and gave money to buyer agents. And the true evildoers in this country, the attorneys who do class action suits, contacted them and said, hey, let's make you an example, we'll make you money. Where in fact, the class action attorneys make millions of dollars on these things. And typically the actual plaintiffs get very little. But that aside, their first complaint was, wait for it, hold on to your chairs. Real estate brokers make too much money. I'd like to tell them to look in the mirror, but real estate brokers, that's their first concept. And so they came up with a legal theory on why our compensation practices violate antitrust laws. Now, that is the basis of the suit that's going forward. Of course, NAI denies anything along those lines. But the Department of Justice, let me flip to that one here for a moment and speak to that. They've also come after us a few years ago. And when their lawsuit started against DOJ, against NAR, my first response was, it's about time. But we have been practicing shorting buyer agency for years. So if you're here to think you're going to get a pat on the back, not happening today. This is Bill Mullen Unleashed. And buyer agency started in the mid-1990s. If you haven't taken the ABR course in the last year or two, you're not practicing good buyer agency. As a matter of fact, there's 400 people on this call. If I ask everybody who thinks they're an incompetent buyer agent to raise their hand this very minute, you'll come to the first screen, my guess would be I'll get 0 people who will raise their hands. Everybody thinks, Veronica, I see you raised your hand. So thank you for being honest. So you need to understand buyer agency inside and out. I have been pontificating about agency rules and laws for years, about you have to understand agency inside and out. Andy Sano teaches our new member orientations right now, about once a month, give or take. He starts every class by asking the class, how many people of you do traditional agency? And 80 to 82%, every class statistically says they are. Then he asks, how many of you do designated agency? And that's the remaining 19%. And someone just demuted and is talking. So I think it was Mark. Thanks, Mark. How many of you do designated agency? They have no idea what they're talking about. And I want to say, if you don't know the difference between designated and traditional and so forth, how do you know the difference between buyer agency and listing agency? They don't. Licensing law teaches you the basics to get your license. It's then your broker's responsibility and your responsibility to get educated. And I've been screaming about buyer agent contracts for 16 years at the board, and years before that when I started at Carlson. I started at Carlson Real Estate Better Homes and Gardens in 1997, 98, Cindy, right around there. And Dick Carlson had rolled out buyer agency when I started. I was actually hired to teach buyer agency to new members coming in. So it's been around for a million years, and NAR has an ABR class, which we offer quarterly, and Sandy again will back me up that we have to cancel this class sometimes because we don't have enough students signed up for it. And you're not taking buyer agency seriously. I just don't know how to say this any other way. That's the key to getting over the hump of what's going on in these lawsuits. You need to become a buyer agent. You need to build your benefit of buyer agency. That's what the the Department of Justice is looking at. That we don't benefit the consumer. Now, do I think we do? Sure, I do. Do I think we do it well as an industry? No, we don't. If we did it well as an industry, we wouldn't be in this mess. My boss gets angry with me or aggravated with me when I bring certain things up, and now I'd like to bring an issue up that I'll get yelled at if I go through with. That I, a couple of weeks ago, got an email with a post from Facebook. And the agent, a woman agent, said, buyer, work with me as your buyer's agent. My services are free. That woman is on this call today. I could publicly shame her and call her out for those types of emails. I didn't email you yet, but that's the problem. And I won't publicly call you out or publicly shame you, but this is the problem. Buyer agents think their agents are free. And I may be preaching to the choir, the majority of you, but the bottom line is you're not spinning that on an ongoing basis with every single buyer. You have to provide the benefit that they bring, that you bring as a buyer agent, and explain that to them. Now, I just tried to share another screen. I'm still on the podcast one, right? So write that one down. But how many of you visited how real estate compensation works? And again, NAR. My boss sent me a text. You search NAR, ABR, or the Center for Realtor Development. Center for Realtor Development. NAR is giving you the tools. And you've had the tools for years. And you're not availing yourself to them to understand the tools well enough. You have to be able to go through compensation. Commissions are always negotiable. You should train every buyer. That should be the first words out of your mouth. Commissions are always negotiable. There are different commissions models to choose from. Commission rates are set by the marketplace. Commissions cannot be included as part of your mortgage. Commissions cannot be included as part of your mortgage. One of the underlying issues in this is buyer commissions cannot be financed. The government hasn't seen fit, or the Department of Justice hasn't seen fit to correct that issue. If you ask me, and you are because you're on the call and I'm the only one speaking, all commissions are paid by the buyer. Everything is paid by the buyer. Why? Because they're the only one who puts money on the table. And in return, the buyer gets the house. The buyer is the one who pays the seller's mortgage. The buyer is the one who pays the listing agent. The buyer is the one who pays the taxes. The buyer is the one who pays everything. But we don't view the transaction in that way. And from an accounting point of view, it goes in the seller's column. And if you ask why, it's because the buyer can mortgage it through the seller paying for it, but not paying for it directly. That's one of the biggest hurdles we need to get over in order to explain this. And I don't think the Department of Justice understands that aspect of this. We all know that buyers are never going to be in a position to have a down payment and independently pay the buyer agent fee without going through the transaction. That's just never going to happen. And if it does, if this lawsuit goes against NAR and they lose the lawsuit, it's going to hurt first-time buyers, low and middle income buyers, because the upper echelon rich people, they have the money to pay for buyer agency. So it's going to have what they call that disparage impact on low income and middle income people and first-time buyers. So I'm hoping and think NAR will be able to explain that well enough to a jury that if they dismiss the model that currently works, it's not only going to bring the economic train of the economic train of the country to a halt. It's going to have a bigger impact on those who don't have those type of fluid income or fluid cash in order to pay the buyer's agent's fee, unless they change the law to allow them to finance that piece through, which is really the key to solving solving all these issues. But for some reason, I doubt the government will go down that road. Anyway, so I've been I've been pontificating for about 17 minutes. I do want to be able to answer questions. So why don't you guys start raising your hands if you know you have questions on the computer to come to the first screen, and I'll start taking them when I get there. But I have a few more things to share before I start taking them. But if you raise your hands in anticipation, I'll ever get to you. I'm now sharing my screen again, or another screen that I want to point out. There we go. You got it? Everybody see that one? Everybody nodding? Do I see people nodding? Good, good. Everybody's nodding. You see that one? 179 ways agents who are realtors are worth every penny of their compensation. And they literally take you down I lost that one. They take you down a list of ways for you to build your value and explain to the consumer what your value is. This is how we're going to address this problem. It's the only way to address it. Excuse me. You have to prove to the consumer and the DOJ that you have value, and this is the value. So it goes through pre-listing activities. It gives a list of things that you should be doing. Listing appointment presentations, offer pricing strategies, confirm sizes and owner's copy of certified surveys, review house plans and make a copy, explain the work you do behind the scenes and your availability on weekends. All of this. The two problems I've been discussing for years is, well, I'm not a big believer in open houses. Statistically, you sell very few houses to the people who walk through an open house who are not represented by clients. I know there'll be some of you on there who would jump up and disagree with me and argue with me and tell me I'm wrong and you sold at open houses, and I have no issue with that. But I think that the reason we do open houses is to show the seller we're working. Think about it. It's the only time they see us actually working. So why are we so shocked that the current generation says, I can find the information online and I can do the job myself? That's the party line. There's no reason for you. Why? We don't explain well enough to the consumer on an ongoing basis in a big picture what our value is and how we have to build our value into every aspect of the transaction. Listing appointment presentation. I'm not going to obviously read 179 things to you, but I've shown you where to get them. And you need to start working with these lists and start doing the things discussing the things with the consumer so that they walk away saying, wow, I can't get through this transaction without a listing agent or a buyer's agent, depending upon if they're selling or buying. It goes through contracts. It goes through the inspection period. It goes through home inspections, what you should do and how you should be there and how you should plan it. It goes through the appraisal process. Process for closing, explaining the closing to them and so forth. Follow up after the closing and so forth. You have to be able to build your value. And I will say, from a big picture, listing agents do this a lot better than buyer agents. I mean, how many of you spend 2 hours with the buyer's agent before you show your first property? They just want to go out and do it. They just want to go out and see it. They just want to go out and see the property. That's not your job. Your job is not only introduce them to the property, but steward them through the entire transaction. Okay, why don't we open it up for some discussion? Tracy, Champion, you were the first one that had your hand up that popped up. Why don't you ask the question?
Yes, thank you so much, Attorney Mullen.
Speak a little louder, Trace.
Oh, Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it, and my office is here. I want to ask you right up the bat here, Bill, and maybe I'm confused, but are you suggesting because of these lawsuits that are happening across the country that we now as buyer agents should be getting compensation from our buyers?
Am I saying that? No. I'm saying you need to develop the tools to get it from them. I do believe you have to have a buyer's contract with them out of the gate.
So Dan, I'm confused.
Yeah.
Bill, are we changing? I was thinking of Dan Mullen, remember him?
Yeah.
But he was a nice man. But what I'm saying, and this is what we're all here, and we want to ask you, we now, the seller's compensation, and as you say, that's really the buyer putting the money up,
Yeah.
is through MLS, and it's stated there. Is that going to change?
Yes, it could.
Okay, and we are now going to have to ask, is that why you're asking for showing us these 179 things?
Well, no, I'm showing them because.
Finish, Mr. Mullen, let me finish.
Yep.
Is that what is happening? That is what we're all nervous about? Because you know what's going to happen then. You're an attorney, so it doesn't matter to you. But us as brokers, it will be very difficult in this industry to go, and even with the 179 things that we provide, and especially for young brokers coming up, to ask as a buyer agent for them to pay. We had a system. It wasn't broke. It's just, I think.
Yeah, you're not going to like my answer, Tracy.
Okay, give it to me.
This system has been broken for 20 years. This system, the tools have been in place for 20 years for buyer brokers to get contracts with their buyers. And as an industry, we've said, no, we can't do it, or no, we won't do it. I'm not giving you anything new that I haven't been talking about for 20 years, Tracy. The industry as a whole, hold on, I'll let you comment again. The industry as a whole did not pick up on buyer agency and say, yes, buyers, you are paying my fee. Now, this is how we may get it. We may get it through the transaction where we reject what the listing agent is offering us, and the buyer asks the seller to pay the buyer's broker's fee through the transaction. I wrote those forms 20 years ago. I see Beverly's online on my first page. Beverly will tell you she has that language that I wrote in her policy 20 years ago on how to do that. It's just as an industry, we haven't picked up and run with that. But that is actually how buyer agency was meant to be done. Yeah, it's still going to come through the transaction, Tracy. And yeah, we're still wanting to put it in the seller's column. But the fact of the matter is, we have to explain to buyers that they pay our fees. Yes, it's hard. Yes, there's a hump. Yes, it's going against a model we've had for 100 years. But I'm trying to prepare you in case we lose the lawsuit on how you need to address this. Well, yeah, back up, second comment or question. Trace.
Second thing is, are we changing all of the listing agreements?
I don't know who's speaking.
This is Bill. He works with me.
I didn't. I'm sorry. Sorry, I didn't realize he was in your room. Sorry, I know. No, we don't have to change the listing agreements because these tools have been in place. What we need to do is explain to the seller, you can offer a compensation, or if you don't want to, you don't have to. But more likely than not, a good buyer's agent will ask you to finance their fee through the transaction as part of their offer. We need to understand it better and then be able to explain it better. I left Carlson in the late 1990s, early 2000s. About 8 years, I practiced real estate and brokerage on my own before I went to the Greater Boston Real Estate Board. I used a buyer's contract, and I said to buyers, yeah, you're ultimately responsible for my fee.
So
now, this is how we're going to get it.
Going back to the agreement, though.
Yep.
The section of the GBAR exclusive listing agreement, there is a section for buyer's agent compensation along with facilitators and
Yes, there is. Yep, Bill, you're up.
will that
And-
change?
Prior to now, you had to have some dollar amount because MLS required you to have a dollar amount.
Well, will that change now, sir?
That is, my understanding is that has changed as part of the settlement agreement that that MLS reached with the lawsuit that they were the class action suit they were under. We don't have the specific details from that, but it's a good question, Tracy. And the reason is that it hasn't been settled yet by the court. The court hasn't approved the settlement. It was supposed to happen, I believe, in October or November, and the Department of Justice came to Boston and made a motion to push back the settlement, the court's agreement or approval on the settlement until next, I believe it's next January now. So they've kicked it down the road because they want more time to look at it.
So when is it, when will this reverberate and impact dual agency?
Dual agency hasn't really been an issue in this regard.
It will be because we don't have buyer's agents.
In order to have dual agency, you have,
If the smart young buyers
yeah,
are gonna come directly to the listing agent
yeah.
and they wanna buy it, and I hand them the dual agency.
No, you shouldn't. Why are you doing that? Why are you making them a client? You can work with them as a customer.
Yeah, because we're a dual agency.
You can work with them as a customer and not represent them. And therefore, you would not go into dual agency. Just because you get both sides of the transaction does not mean it becomes dual agency. You're creating dual agency by making the buyer a client. Remember the old days where listing agents offered out compensation to sub-agents?
Yes.
Sub-agent represented the listing agent, and they were a customer to the buyer. That system's still in place. System hasn't gone anywhere. You do not have to go into dual agency in order to get both sides of the transaction. By the way, I'm not going to delve into this, but there's also in these different tools I'm sending you to a whole slew of information on going to the listing agent and why it actually hurts the buyer. So today's a discussion to see what you have to learn to do. I'm not teaching today. This isn't a class today, but there's information in ways and statistics and graphs and charts which show that going to the listing agent is not better for the buyer, and the downfalls on why going to the listing agent is the false opinion that it's better. Bill, did I answer your question?
Yeah, but I'm concerned that because we live in a litigious society.
Yep. I get it.
And representing both sides, whether they become a customer or not, we're still open. Campion and Company is a dual agency shop. We are not.
Okay. But this particular issue that we're talking about with the DOJ and so forth is not taking on dual agency. They're not incorporating. That's not their argument, the legal arguments they've made.
That's a yet.
What's a yes?
A yet.
Not yet.
Yes. Oh, yeah, you're right. Bill, I'll give you that one. I'll give you that one. Yet they have not yet done that.
Won't even.
I don't know if they will or not, but
Won't take up more of your time because there's other people with hands up.
sure.
But you start
Thereafter.
getting. One last thing.
Oh.
Somebody gets a contract, okay? Boom, boom, boom. They come to me. I do the whole deal. I've been brought up on this. Procuring cause.
Yep.
You guys have not straightened that out with buyer agent. It is not straightened out, and I don't understand it. And you can't answer it to me. And I go to
Trace, I'm familiar with some of your issues, and you're right. That is an issue. It does rise.
Yeah.
The more you prepare the buyer and spend time with them, and explain it to them, and so on and so forth, should protect you more and more from buyer agency over a period of time.
I
Um,
understand, but
the golden pill is not just getting them to sign a contract. I think part of the problem is that the listing agent who worked with them first dropped the ball, didn't service them, so they went to somebody else, and now they're claiming that everything they did was correct, and the second broker shouldn't be compensated at all. And so I'm on the same page with you on that one, Tracy. I do believe that that can become a problem also. But the only thing I can speak to you is do your best job as a buyer's agent.
and
Um,
Ms. Mayor Mullen, thank you so much for doing this. And you are right. We do have to learn more about buyer agency.
Thank you.
100%.
Thank you. Thanks, Trace. Daphne, you're up next.
Thank you so much. Hi, Bill, and hi, everyone. Thank you for doing this. It's so important. Mine is sort of a follow-up question because I was going to ask you exactly the same question regarding forms. And I'm surprised by your answer
Well,
saying
we'll look at the forms, Daphne. Don't get me wrong. I mean,
Okay.
the committee is planning to look at them,
that,
but I
okay.
think the way they currently are, they can still be being used. Now,
Well, I think right now we're in a status quo, but my biggest
Right.
concern around the forms
Right.
and around how we will all need to start explaining buy-side compensation to sellers
so
from the proposed, may I just finish this 1 second, Bill? Because from the proposed, and I know it hasn't been agreed upon yet, but the proposal by MLS PIN specifically, and I remind everyone on here, MLS PIN is not a realtor MLS, right? So there are changes, there are nuances within that already. But their proposal is to take away our ability as listing agents to compensate buyer agents. If there is compensation to be had, it will come from the seller. So already our listing forms and all those contracts need to be changed because that is not
Well,
the language
again,
that is
Daphne,
on there right now
I am not going to start even looking at contracts to change
until it's all got
all of this is settled and done.
it. I agree.
Obviously, you know, if NAL or loses, and I have no details on the MLS, you have an advantage over what they're changing.
It's publicly available. Yeah.
Well, until it's settled by a court, we don't know. So
Got it.
I don't mean that I don't understand what the thoughts are. It's until it's
It's-
settled by a court, there's no reason for us to look at our forms or trade the forms. But I'm going to give you a different spin that concerns me more, that
Okay.
maybe everyone is not as familiar with. The Northwestern boards changed their listing contracts to do
2019 or so?
exactly what you're saying. And I've reviewed them and seen them at the seller will be paying compensation, not us. Department of Justice has come back and said that's not enough.
I know, and that's why they're pushing back on MLS PIN right now. And that is a big concern because it may not be enough and we may be forced to do even further things. I get
So,
it.
yeah, you have your arms around the big picture, Daph. Problem is, I'm somewhat playing Nostradamus today because I don't know until all of these issues get settled. We really can't guide you. So I have to look at the issues I can guide you on, and that's the buyer compensation side. You need to, have those tools in your toolbox in order to explain it all to the buyers so that if or when it happens, you've hit the ground running and you have the ability to respond and go.
Got it. Agree.
Man,
100%.
that's what I see my job is today.
Perfect.
Christopher, somebody, Vika, do you have a camera?
Hey there, how you doing today?
Good. Do you have a question for us?
Yeah, I think the link that you shared a few minutes ago, you said that you were going to post that as a resource. I didn't know if you were going to post that in the chat or something.
Kevin Butler, who's on the call, he can post that in the chat for me. I can't. I'm technically incompetent, so don't even try to get me to do it.
No,
but
I appreciate that. If
these resources, again, just to remind you, these resources are available at the Center for Realtor Development. Just go to nar.realtor and they're simple to find.
Okay. Yep. And then do we know if GBAR is offering any follow-up discussions to this one that will build on it?
We haven't planned any yet, but my guess is my boss will be making me do this. My guess is we'll do this exact same conversation again in the first quarter next year. when we'll
Okay.
have more information probably, but yeah, we have a lot of discussions. And Christopher, you can always call me on the brokerage counseling line to discuss.
Hey, be
any
careful what
issues
you
at
ask
all.
for, Bill.
I'm gonna move on to our next question. Brenda, you're up next.
Hey.
Hi, Bill. How are you? All right, I have two parts to this. The first part is I'm worried about the VA and the FHA people who cannot afford already to and don't have to put down anything, and how they're going to even be able to,
Yep.
come and pay anybody at that point, number one. And the second part is, which really, really worries me, is the DOJ is the one who took us from the dual agency years ago and brought us to designated agency, and which worked fine. And now they're messing with us all over again. And I really think what's going to happen is that we are going to have a ton for probably about 2 years. We're going to have a ton of people that are going to go directly to the listing agent. And there's going to be so many court cases because they're going to think that they're getting representation, but they're not. And then it's going to be a courts filled with cases, and then they're going to end up coming back to us. And we're going to do this all over again in a couple of years.
So
And-
Brenda, the DOJ had nothing to do with dual agency and taking us to designated several years ago. It was much more local. In fact, there was a person who 2 years committee at MAR that brought designated forward in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And he doesn't ask for credit very often, but it's me. I'm the one who did that. I'm the one who presented it and brought designated forward in the Commonwealth. Took
And
2
I love
years
that.
to
I
get
love
people to-
that.
What wasn't the DOJ? So I want to stop crossing this dual agency and DOJ issue, because that's really not. They don't understand agency well enough to bring this issue up. That's
So
not.
that's my
That's
second
the actual truth.
That's
But I
my-
get it. There's going to be a period where listing agents are going to benefit somewhat from this. We also have John, you need to jump on for the date. We have, I think it's October 26th. We have a panel being put together for broker owners. And we're going to discuss this issue. And one of the things we're focusing on is the misnomers about going directly to a listing agent, and how it actually hurts the consumer and will cost more money in the long run. I don't have the graphs and charts in front of me, but we have a 3-person panel, and Jody O'Brien, who teaches our ABR, has put a bunch of graphs together specifically addressing that issue, Brenda. So I would recommend all of you to remind your broker owners we have this course coming up, and they can get a lot of good materials to feed back to you guys. I need to move on because I have many hands up. Paula, what do you got?
I just have one simple question. I just want to confirm that in the NAR Realtor Development area, that's where we find this 179
Yes,
wage agents. Thank you,
Yes.
Bill.
do a search there, you'll be able to find it.
Thank you.
Edwine, did I pronounce that correctly? You gotta unmute.
Oh, okay, I'm back.
How do I
It's Ed.
pronounce
You
that?
can call me Ed. Thanks
Ed.
for everything, Bill.
What do you got?
I know there's a lot of confusion and anxiety about all of this. I have confusion about a provision in the Code of Ethics about buyers agents asking for additional compensation from the seller. The concern is with these changes that the compensation to buyers agents is likely to be less in the future. Say if the offering is lower than what your buyer agency contract is, but there's language in standard practice 16-16 that says realtors shall not use the terms of an offer to purchase or lease.
Yeah,
to
let me
attempt to
just
modify-
jump right on it. What we teach and what I teach and the forms I was talking about earlier was a buyer can ask a seller to pay whatever they want. A buyer's agent cannot ask what's offered out by a listing agent a different amount than that's been listed out. So you've confused the concepts.
Okay,
One of the things I always, again, I picked on Beverly earlier, because I know her company has my forms. I have language that specifically says that you attach to the offer that says, buyer broker is hereby rejecting offer of compensation from the listing agent. And the buyer is asking the seller to pay the buyer broker X% and the dining room table and the pool table in the basement.
Okay.
It's a negotiation between the buyer and seller, and we're taking it out of out of the hands of the listing agent, the buyer agents. And that's where I see it, that this is gonna end up being the law, which is what Northwestern boards try to do right away. And what Daphne brought up about shifting that to an MLS to buyers and sellers negotiating terms, not the brokers themselves. So again, these tools have been in place for a long time. We've just never wrapped our arms around them and incorporated them into our daily working day. Beverly, I picked on you enough. Do you have your hand up? What do you got? Unmute.
Yeah, I am. So, yes, I do have that clause, and it's hardly been used over the last 3 years because of the competitiveness of the
Yep,
marketplace.
I get it.
So that's something that going into the next phase of whatever happens with the lawsuit, is going to change how our MLS is offering probably compensation. There's a lot of things that will be addressed after there's settlement and agreement on what needs to be done.
Absolutely.
The comment I was going to make was on the question earlier about, representation and dual agency, and we were talking about forms that need to be addressed. And correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're doing dual agency, you're taking on twice the responsibility as being a buyer agent and a seller agent, and then trying to measure responsibilities between those two roles so that nobody does sue you. Someone said, well, maybe, it's going to open up more lawsuits. I think that if someone is representing a seller and a buyer comes to them and they agree to represent the buyer as not represent the buyer and be a seller's agent representation, and you've signed an agency disclosure with them as a seller's agent, is there a form? I haven't seen one, so maybe I've missed it, but there's no form, an additional form like we would sign if somebody waives a home inspection. We give them an additional form to verify that they're waiving that. If somebody is deciding to use the listing broker, is there any form of waiver
Yes.
of that?
Yes, the agency disclosure form.
No,
Let me
that's it. That's
remind
the
you-
one I use, but that's
and
all
let me-
there is.
And let me remind you how to fill it out. I work for the seller. I'm the seller's agent. Buyer signs it as a customer. That's what shows the customer relationship with the buyer. That's how you document it.
Right.
And Tracy earlier and you now have brought up this idea of, future lawsuits and so forth. I'm going to go to another famous William, way more famous than me, I think Shakespeare, who said, if we want to make the world work properly, the first thing we have to do is kill all the lawyers. So lawyers are there, they're out there, and they attack those who they think are hurting their clients, in this case, the consumer.
If
And the
you,
jury's still out. It's easy for me to, go on and on about I think they're gonna lose. We'll know in about 4 weeks on the first class action suit on whether we win or lose.
one
Now-
last thing, Bill.
Sure.
This is all gonna change for the better because this is bringing awareness for people to know what their role is and
Mhm.
what they have to do, what they can and cannot do in their role. So the education process is gonna be in high demand, and those that choose not to be educated will be the ones that'll be sued.
Absolutely. I mentioned we do the ABR course 4 times a year, quarterly. We've already finished this year, but if you want to jump on it earlier, you could do the ABR course online. I would suggest you do it online and in person and do it over and over and over again. because you'll learn more techniques the more you take the course. But you're 100% correct, Beverly. We have to educate ourselves. We've been through this before. When buyer agency came in, the sky is falling. The sky is falling. It didn't fall. It happened when we started dual agency. The sky is falling. The sky is falling. It didn't fall. It happened when we did designated agency. The sky is falling. The sky is falling. It didn't fall. We'll get through this one too. I know the road is bumpier maybe than the last couple times, but we'll get through it. I mean, people need buyer agents. People need to have their backs when they buy the lawsuits don't say buyer agents aren't valuable and don't help the buyer. Lawsuits say they're getting paid too much money for what they do to help the buyer. But the lawsuits are not saying buyer agents have no value at all. And so keep that in mind. But you're right. Step by step, education will get us there. Mel, you had your hand up a bit ago. Did you take your hand down, or you have a question? I can't hear you. You're muted.
Yeah, I have a question about the escrow. So
Hi, Marilyn, but I was talking to Mel Maltogia. But since you're talking, go ahead. Tell me what you got, Marilyn.
I thought you said Maryland.
Sorry.
Escrow. So if you write an offer, I have someone offering $1, so we're writing an offer. Would Keller Williams hold the commission? So the escrow, usually we try to make it match if it's 5% or 4%. So it just makes paperwork easier.
But Marilyn, I have no idea what you're talking about. Let me back this bus
the
up.
buyer broker,
Let me back
if
this
there's
bus
no
up.
compensation being offered from the listing brokerage and we're exercising a buyer agency contract, can Keller Williams as the broker hold the buyer agent commission?
I again don't have any idea what you're talking about, but let me see if I understand what you're trying to say. The listing agent offered out $1. As the buyer's agent, the buyer can ask the seller to pay more compensation. I could care less if they offered out $1. You need a buyer contract. You need to establish what you are going to be paid by the buyer.
They're going to pay me. They're going to pay direct. We're not having the seller pay. So we
that's fine.
Then
And so
my question is about escrow. Would Keller Williams
I have no idea. I have no idea what escrow procedures your company follows. I have no idea what escrow procedures your company follows. If it's going through the transaction, the buyer can pay it into escrow in advance or the day of the closing. But I can't respond to detailed questions like that without understanding the transaction details itself.
Got it. Thank you.
Elizabeth, you're up next.
Thank you.
Hi.
All right, this is not a question. I'm here to volunteer. If you need me to go to the DOJ, I know you're saying that they're not saying that buyer agents are not needed. They're not saying that, but I have performed duties as a buyer agent that I'm sure are not on that list. You need a certain mindset to protect your buyer. I've had two separate instances where lenders have tried to tell my buyer, well, you know what? Why don't you go over there and scrape and paint those windows, and then we'll be able to close it. One of them said it because they don't offer a rehab product. And the other one said it because it's going to be easier. And I had to fight against that. Oh, they want to do it. He wants to do it. Yeah, he wants to do it because he's young, stupid, and doesn't know any better. Oh, they have to sell it. No, they don't. After he goes over there and fixes somebody else's property, they don't have to sell it. They could turn around and say, I'm going to give it to my kids or whatever. So buyer agents do more than just open doors. And I think maybe somebody, and I'm sure it's not on that list. Okay. It's not about, I need to educate myself. No, that's not it. And the other thing is that this idea that we get paid too much. No, we spend a lot of time taking people around that then it doesn't do anything. So you need to have money to carry yourself during that period as well. I just want to volunteer to try to explain this to somebody that will listen.
Elizabeth, I cannot carry a tune with two hands, but you're singing to the choir. I'm in agreement on everything you're saying. Buyer agents bring a lot more value to the transaction than the Department of Justice or these lawsuits are looking at. I completely agree with you. But we need to go through the process and prove our value on an ongoing basis to every consumer, one consumer at a time. It's the only way it's ever going to happen. We're the boots on the boots on the ground. And so I love comments like that. I love hearing your depth of understanding and what your job is. Because that's how buyer agency and advocating for the consumer is going to survive. Let me go to the next question. Veronica, you had your hand up.
I just want to say, they've already told us that the United States is the only one with buyer agency. No other country has it. So they
And
have
their
not.
argument is no other country charges as high for commissions. Well, there's a reason for that, because no other country has the buyers back like we do.
Right. So if they're going to change it to that, then they would also have to say, all right, Mr. Seller, you're going to have to pay for the inspection and make it public to everybody. All the stuff that the buyer agents can, and it's never going to be everything that we did.
Yep.
So if we're gonna lose, just don't roll over. That's all I'm asking. Somebody needs to start fighting, and I'm volunteering. That's
Okay. I don't specifically know how you have a plug in, but John Delcheski, my executive officer, send him an email, reach out to him, and he may have some ideas on how you can
somebody
help.
needs to send me his name. John.
John D. JOND at GBREB. Very simple. I can't spell Dolchevsky either, but his email is John D. I've been working for him for 16 years. I tell him all the time, I can't spell your last name. John D at GBREB.com. Great Up Boston, RealEstateBoard.com. Veronica, he's actually on the call. On my screen, he's directly under you.
Okay. Not on my screen, but
So he should be on your first screen where you are right now, right underneath. Veronica, what do you got?
Hey, Bill. Hi, everyone. I'm just here to offer just a bit of hope amongst all of this chaos and doom and gloom. I was fortunate enough to attend many buyer agency classes conducted by Bill, as well as other esteemed instructors within our marketplace. Granted that my buyer agency days, buyer representative days were in the late 1990s and early 2000s. And I did do buyer consultations. I stated my fee as was appropriate within our company. And I consulted and I told them how I was going to be paid, where the money would come from. They signed a buyer agent contract with me. And on many an occasion, because I couldn't get the fee from the transaction at that time, it was typically out of the MLS co-broke, what was being offered. And checks were cut to my company, to my brokerage. And all I'm saying is this, with attending classes, like Bill said, and with education, it's going to be hard. It was hard when buyer agency came into play, and it was grueling. But it did ultimately work, and we were ultimately able to do business. There are uncomfortable conversations, and it's uncomfortable learning, but it can be done. And Bill nailed it right now. All of these other things we cannot control. We can control how we educate ourselves and how we conduct ourselves out in the marketplace. And that 179 item sheet is one way to start, and then customize it from the tools available within your brokerage policies, the extra that you bring to the table as a professional and an educated realtor. I know those of you that haven't been in the business since 1993, like myself, and much longer by other realtors that are here on this call today. But it was done before. We can do it again. And so I just wanted to offer a ray of hope, because this is tough. There's a lot going on out there, but all we can control is how we conduct ourselves. And Beverly said it. We have come out of and are still slightly in a crazy market where all bets were off. It was like the Wild West. Beverly, disagree with me if I respect your opinion. If you disagree with me, and you know it was the Wild West.
Absolutely. And that's all the rules and the procedures that we followed before to cover those issues of representation, even to the home inspection process, the appraisal clauses, all of those things that we knew in our hearts were dangerous for our clients became
Right.
what
Came out
the
the window.
rule of thumb was, and it was,
Right.
we're gonna
So
pay for it.
I just want to close and just say to thank you to GBAR for putting this on. But educate yourselves, start having taking advantage of what GBAR has made available to you, and Bill said it too with the CBR. You can't take that class enough times. You can't.
Right.
You have to all the time.
Absolutely. You learn something new every time you take it.
So
Um,
thank you, Bill, for allowing me
You're
this.
welcome.
Good luck, everyone.
You're welcome. My boss has told me on more than one occasion, and I have joined 3 times in my lifetime gym memberships and never walked into the gym once, even though I paid to be a member. We have the tools, we have the classes. You have to avail yourselves to them. You're a member, you're paying for memberships, you gotta avail yourself to this information, and you gotta buckle down and do the work to get it, understand it. I'm gonna go to you, Rob Daly, and then you, Diane Needle. Rob, what do you got? Unmute. Unmute. Rob, hit the unmute yourself. Diane, you're laughing.
Sorry
You're
about that.
gonna do it
Here we go.
next.
So anyway, Bill, thanks very much. I want to echo some of what Bill said in the sense that it's great advice for all the agents out there and realtors to take the ABR course. I took it way back at the beginning when it was first offered, and it was I still get a lot out of it now. And in those early days of buyer agency, there was a lot of fear, and the sky was falling. And one of the fears that no one mentioned, but was actually going into sellers and say, well, now we're going to pay the buyer agent, and that's going to come out of the commission. We're willing to do that. And that was an uncomfortable conversation to have way back when. But we got through that. And I think this is a similar thing. So my takeaway from today is, with respect to what we should do, is really just watch and see what comes out of the judgments, the DOJ, because people are making changes that they may have to undo. Is that correct, Bill?
It is.
Okay.
They
good.
have to, some people have, let's say, bad habits or tools and not using their tools to their full effectiveness. How about that?
Right. So I think like I say, it's great advice to tell agents, especially the ones that work with a lot of buyer clients, to get in there and understand, their worth through the ABR course and the CBR course. So I'm going to advise my agents to do that. We've had a couple meetings now, and it's been a lot of angst. I can tell you that. Now, with respect to dual agency, I think we get the same conversation. I'm echoed. The thing, you don't have to be a dual agent if you're doing an open house and a buyer comes directly to you. And I advise my agents not to become dual agents and not to ascribe to it, because it's dangerous. So I was happy to hear that. I guess the one thing that I looked at the video sent by NAR, and that they're advocating that you show to sellers, and they keep on saying, and I just wonder why we do that. They're asking us to do it, is say commissions are negotiable.
Well, they are
Is there a better way to say that?
They are negotiable. Why not?
Well, I know, but let me frame it up in a different way. Okay, say you go into the car dealership, and and we're not car salesmen, but even if you go into the attorney, the first thing he says, I just want to let you know my fees are negotiable. So I think it's putting us at a real disadvantage when we go into ourselves and say, hey, we're going to talk about commissions today, and let me tell you that my commission is negotiable.
Well, again, Rob, how you present it obviously is an issue. I don't walk in and say my commissions are negotiable. When I did buyer brokerage, I walked in and said, I charge X%. Here's how it will go through the transaction. Yep. If you want a different amount, you can hire somebody else, but that's the fee I charge.
Right, I understand that.
If you want the best negotiator in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you're going to pay it. But
Yeah.
I
So,
mean,
so I guess my
oh,
point is I don't know if you've seen that video that Nargis
I
put out.
haven't, and I don't want to nitpick a video. If it doesn't,
Yeah.
if the way they say it doesn't work for you, I'm comfortable with that.
So,
If you-
okay, that was my question. So we can say, hey, look, commissions, there's no standard commission.
You
Must
need
be a
to,
violation of the
you
antitrust
need
law.
to come up with a way to present the information, and it's a way that's most comfortable for you and get certain points across.
Okay,
Now,
good.
there's no standard commission. This is what I charge. You might be able to get it cheaper, but I'm the best negotiator in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Let me build my value. And that's where I've been driving at, that they're going to be willing to pay whatever your commission is if they see the benefit.
Gotcha.
And
Okay,
that's
great.
what you have
Thank
to
you
drill
very
down
much.
on. I am going to say that we have about another half hour. I usually go 90 minutes, even though we book it that's an hour, so I don't need any of you to hang up. I did take a moment to go down and look to see who else is on the call. I'm not going to call people out like Norman or Rob Harrington or Judy Moore or Deb Heffernan. I'm going to see you smile. I'm not going to call you guys out on the call, but I see a lot of friends on the call, and I want to thank you for participating. Thanks, Deb. Beautiful smile. And participating today. And I hope you seen some of the value in the discussions. We've got, like I said, about another 25 minutes. So let me get back to some questions. Diane Needle, how about you?
Hi, Bill. I'm great. Thanks for doing this. I recently was privileged to take a CE course. The title of it was DOJ Lawsuit Updates and Buyer Agency.
Nice. Who did?
It was sponsored by the Women's Council of Realtors. It was taught by Kimberly Allard. Is that okay that I plug that?
Kim knows herself.
Okay. And in that course, in addition to the ABR, I will just say that this business is all about communication. I've only been in this business for 10 years, and I can tell you the things that I learned simply from my broker. I trusted my broker, and I was taught by my brokers. And now the brokers and what they were doing is what's at the crux of these lawsuits. So it's up to all of us, and if you have team members or your own brokerage, to teach the agents what to say and how to communicate. And what I've been taking away from everyone speaking on this call is that that is our biggest concern. We don't want to say anything wrong. We're worried that we won't get paid as a buyer agent. We're worried about what to say on our listing appointments. I'd like to share one line that I just learned that I'm going to use, if that's okay, Bill, because I go to listing appointments, and I think this is the problem and why you have over 200 people on the call. You're a lawyer. We're out on the field every day meeting with clients. And we don't want to say we're free, if God forbid we ever said that before. We don't want to say you must offer this to a buyer agent. We don't want to say the wrong thing. And this script, I'm just going to say out loud. On a listing appointment, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, for all of the services that we provide to you in this transaction, we charge X%. Now let's talk about the offer of compensation to the brokerage that brings the buyer. This is merely a suggestion. I think the biggest fear amongst everyone in real estate right now is that people don't believe in buyer agency anymore, and that listing agents want to cut out buyer agents. And that is not the case. We just need to know how to communicate properly to our sellers, let them know that buyer agents are incredibly valuable, and make a suggestion. But again, it's not a required standard, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
so
I agree. It was an old 1970s song. There was a line in it that said, "Communication is the answer to the problem." You don't want me to sing it, but I do recall the song very well. I was a speech communication major in undergrad because I recognized the importance of how to communicate. I knew I was going to go on to law school or desired to, and you have to learn how to communicate, and you have to communicate effectively and efficiently. One of the things attorneys do all the time that you may or may not really realize why they do it is you go into an attorney's office, you sit down, you tell them your story, and they repeat the story back to you. Not because you don't know it, because they want to make sure they understood what you told them. So you need to hear that story back again. For all of you who've ever called the brokerage counseling line, I do that all the time. You'll be halfway through your story, and I'll say, stop. So what you're telling me is, and I repeat it back to you to make sure I understand that. You need to do that with your buyers and your sellers and communicate and get tools to effectively communicate. You mentioned scripts. I used to teach a 3-week new member counseling course. He used to do a three-week course. I taught portions of it. Other instructors taught other portions. We used to make them read scripts over and over, read scripts, and I didn't see the value. And I'd be like, why am I making them read scripts? This is stupid. By week 2, by end of week 2, week 3, they'd come back and say, it was like the words just came out of my mouth. It wasn't we were trying to get them to learn specific scripts wording, but they picked up on how to use the action words. They picked up how to explain things because it was drilled into them. They practicing. So they were able to do that. Dave Matthews, I'm going to go to you next. Just so for the rest of you though, as the romper room, I looked through my little magic mirror and saw Bill Germany, Dale Lockberg, a bunch more of my friends out there. So I'm calling out to wave to you. Thanks for being on the call. I also see Captain Jones, who looks a lot like somebody else, but I'm waving you out on the call to wave. Dave Matthews, you're up.
Thanks, Bill. My question to you is there any talk of making buyer agency contracts required? I know some states do require buyer agency
You
contracts.
see what I'm doing? All right, Dave, I chaired the designated agency committee for 2 years. We had 16 meetings. Not one of them lasted less than 4 hours. 16 meetings, and many of them went more than 4 hours. When the day came down to buyer agency, designated agency or not, 20 people voted yes and 20 people voted no. And I sat there and said to myself, are you kidding me? 24 months, hundreds of hours of discussion and research and all this stuff, and the decision is on my back. I could have done this 2 years ago. One of the things I tried to push through was requiring the buyer contract, like in New Hampshire, make it a required thing. I could not get it through that committee. The main person, who I'm not going to name, 3 years later came back to me and said, main person objecting to all designated agency, against it, came back to me 3 years later and said, you know, Bill, we should have pushed through the buyer agents who mandatory in the Commonwealth. I almost killed the man. I 100% agree with you, Matt. Nobody had the appetite, desire, whatever, to make it part of the law. So
Do you think that might change now with the,
I don't see anybody behind that trying to push it through the legislation. You have a legislator, you have people you contact, call them up and say, hey, how can we get something like this through? Now start at the ground level, the grassroots. John, you have your hand up. I'm assuming that you just did so people can see you and you don't have a question, but you have a comment?
I actually did. Thanks, Bill. I just wanted to make mention, if people hadn't seen, we did activate the chat. So links to all of the documents and website pages that you referenced on NAR are posted in the chat. If people want them, we'll include them in the follow-up email as well. In addition, I just wanted to emphasize competition.realtor and the website realestateCommissionFacts.com as 2 websites to pay particular attention to and visit for additional resources.
I actually instruct them to shut off the chat during this because it's too small for me to read. Stephanie Mitchell, you're being called out to raise your hand and come and make your comments because your comments are too small for me to read. But I see that you talk about the offer and buyer agency, and I think it may be a good comment to make and ask a question. So Stephanie, I'm looking for you. You're still on the call. Go to Barrington.
First, I'm here.
Yep.
First, I suggested that that in the offer, we write in what our compensation is, and that we get it from the seller. I said after the buyer, I think if we add what the seller nets in the offer after the buyer agency is reflected in the offer, it gives the seller control as to what they are actually accepting and getting from the buyer. Both the buyer and the seller are fully informed through the offer and through their respective buyer and seller contracts. In addition, I said, given the lawsuits, your mandatory buyer agency suggestion is a win-win. Our buyers deserve to know what we are responsible for.
Yeah, I fully agree. In order to do that, you have to have a contract with the buyer designating how much are to be paid. But I keep mentioning these forms that I've done for some offices in Beverly's office that specifically reject the offer that the listing agent's offering out, and the buyer asks the seller to pay the buyer's broker compensation pursuant to the contract the buyer has with the buyer broker. So you're right on the money. That's how we have to start approaching this. Mr. Harrington, your hand is up. How may I help you?
I'm sorry, I just want to hijack your meeting slightly. Tomorrow is the Sustainability Symposium, and I just wanted to mention it. There's so many of our members online. It's an unbelievable, about 3/4 of a day program tomorrow with great speakers from the state. Craig Foley's going to be teaching classes. And as we talk about buyer agency, what a better way to set yourself apart, but learn more about all the sustainability that's going on in housing, energy efficiencies, HERDS ratings, solar energy, et cetera. So I just wanted to give that program a plug for tomorrow.
Excellent. Thanks, Rob. It is a great program. Great speakers. We've got about 16 minutes left. Anybody have further questions or want to be heard on it? Raise your hand. I'm just kind of going through the list of people here right now. And want to give you an opportunity. Elizabeth, what do you got?
Okay, so we obviously we know we're going to write it into the offer and say we want blank compensation. Okay. Doesn't anyone else see that what they're doing is setting up a situation where we're going to start slicing and cutting ourselves? People are going to start saying, I'll do it for 1% so that they can get the offer through. Am I the only one that doesn't see that? It is not about you got to educate yourself and you got to educate yourself, but that's not, I don't think that's the key. Am I the only person that sees that they're just waiting for us to sit back and watch them kill ourselves?
Hold on. We're not going to talk about percentages. We're not going to open up an antitrust issue here where you said gave a percentage figure. However, yeah, I see that can happen, but that is what competition is. That's, there is no standard amount in the industry. If someone Elizabeth, you can buy a Volkswagen or you can buy a Cadillac. There are big differences on their value, big differences on their prices, but you have the option to either one. So people who want to work for less money but serve the purpose, then they will take over the industry at less money. Ultimately, the consumer will drive what they're willing to pay for somebody's services. But I don't like the idea of people playing games with what they're offering out or what they're taking, just to put other people out of business. I get what you're saying, don't get me wrong, but that's always been a problem. That's not a new problem if somebody wants to do discount brokerage or discount. But discount brokerage leads to discount services. And therefore, you got to build your value.
I understand that, but you know what? When people are down to their money and their last penny, they'll take a chance. They'll say, well, I think I know everything. You know what I mean? But I won't, never mind. I'm volunteering.
Jody O'Brien used to tell a story that I always loved. She ordered a jacket, I think it was salmon colored jacket from Nordstrom's. And it came, she ordered online and it came. And she then decided to send it back, and she wrapped it up on a dining table and sent it back to Nordstrom's. And she used to say, I could buy a salmon-colored jacket from Nordstrom's or from Walgreens. A day later, she got a package back from Nordstrom's. She had wrapped up her silver baby cup by mistake and sent it to Nordstrom's. They found it. They sent it back to her, I sent her an email and sent it back to her 1 day later, and ready? They polished the cup. That's the service level that she got from Nordstrom's. She is a lifetime Nordstrom's buyer now because the service level they gave her. So Brenda, when you sit, Elizabeth, when you sit there shaking your head, it's
Yeah,
the
you're killing
level
me
of
because you know
service.
what? You don't have that many. Listen, go and buy something. You can buy something 5 times a year
Yes.
or whatever. You know,
Yes.
that's not the same thing. And you can do all the service and not get paid a penny in this business.
Well, I don't think there's anybody in this business who gives service that doesn't get paid a penny. Because they
I
won't
said
be
you
in the
can give a
service.
lot of service in this
They
business and not
won't
get
be.
paid a
They
penny.
won't be in this industry very long if they're not getting paid anything.
Okay, I'm gonna stop
They'll
talking
get
because
driven out.
you're not understanding what I'm saying.
They'll
That's
get driven out. Maybe I'm not. Brenda, what do you got for me?
I just wanted to ask the other part of my question. During these cases, are any realtors brought in to speak, to defend ourselves? Because all I keep hearing is that we get paid too much. Do we ever get to say what we do to the judges?
Well, the
defend them?
NAR has a slew of witnesses and expert witnesses and people who will testify things like that in the trial. That's their job, is to present our position as best they can and to win the trial. And so they're on that. Chip, I'm going to go to you next because you're the next guy up. And then
Yeah,
Brenda,
hey, wonder if you
Beverly,
could
Chip.
wonder if you could respond. I've seen some news that some of the major brokerages are recommending their agents to leave NAR.
Yeah.
Could you
Want me
comment
to
on that,
respond?
please?
Oh, sure. I'll respond. John, could you turn off your microphone for a minute? Yeah, they're jumping off the ship. They're the rats jumping off because there's problems going on. I don't know if NAR is going to be around in a year from now, or 2 years, or 3 years, or if this is going to implode on themselves. We'll find that out over the next few weeks. But I think big brokerages who are jumping ship are not wanting to address the problem and help fix the problem and be part of helping NAR out. I believe one of the MLS requirements, and I could be wrong, I could have heard it somewhere else, is that one of the settlements says that you do not have to be a member of a realtor organization. You've never had to be a member of the realtor organization. People choose to be members of the realtor organization. But the one big company that you're referring to that's left us has been threatening to leave for the last 5 years. So it has nothing to do with the lawsuits currently going on, nothing to do with the harassment cases that have come out of NAR. They're just choosing this time to embarrass NAR as much as they can leaving. Go ahead. No, Chip, those are my comments. You don't
Well,
want to
hey,
help
thank
solve
you.
the problem? Then go. Now they have a different business model than a lot of other companies, so maybe they have to leave the realtor organization to survive. That's your choice. You can certainly leave. No one has to be a member of NAR. You choose to be members. Now you're pointing the finger at us like you have to be. John, I hope you shut off your speakers so I don't get in trouble. But Beverly, what do you got?
I heard every word.
Thank you.
And agree? And agree? See you nod your head. Beverly?
Okay. First of all, I just kind of touched on something you already said to Elizabeth, but it's, I shudder to admit to everyone that I've been in this industry for over 40 years. And
You started in the 3rd grade, Beverly.
well, that was maybe the case, but I did. And so I've seen a lot of changes, a lot of economic changes and a lot of policy changes. And what I see across the board throughout each of these challenges that we've had to meet is panic and fear that even when I started, there wasn't the internet. So we drove documents everywhere and we had a whole different way of operation. And there are many on this call, people in our industry that are still there with me who can remember that. And then the internet came and the panic was, we're going to be out of business. They don't need us anymore. They're going to go online and find what they want. And someone said, yeah, these young buyers are going to find the listing agent and they're going to go to them. And it spawned a little discussion we had on dual agency and processes there. The bottom line is that if you, number one, get people who have used you to write testimonials about the value of what you gave them and use that as your mantra and trying to demonstrate to other people that it's not just about finding the listing, it's about being able to purchase it and be advised of what will work in your favor or not. Even when we were waiving appraisal, even when we were waiving home inspection, the good agents were putting paperwork in place that advised them that this wasn't your recommendation, but that if they chose to do it, this is, you know, the risk that they were taking. But the market really put them, everybody, us and them, in the buyers and us, in the position of having to make those hard decisions. But we've survived it because the pendulum is slowly swinging the other way. And if you provide your value, if you don't get fearful and you start preparing for how, I mean, your idea of going back to scripts, I've had agents in the business for less than 5 years who have made comments to me about, you know, I'll never be able to address problems or objections that get presented the way you did it, but you can, because everybody starts out and everybody educates themselves on what's important to the clients that they're focusing on. So we don't take advantage of a lot of the programs that GBAR and MAR and some of the other franchises might be offering because time is so limited. But now is the time to be able to take advantage of that. I wish I had gone to the WCR Women's Council, excuse me, the council meeting that they had the other day, because it's nice to get another perspective on how these actions, these legal
So
actions.
Bev,
are coming into
you
it.
know, I date back to when we had books also before computers, and then computer and Bay State and then the internet and so on and so forth. And
Everything changed, and we all
every new
can.
change was the sky is falling. The sky is falling. Well, we're in one of those moments right now. John, I'm going to ask you to speak on the new education thing we just started or is coming soon in a minute. But I'm going to go to Ann Spry and then Mario Liana. Not sure if I pronounced that right or not, but Ann, I'm going to you first and then to you. Ms.
Hey, Bill,
Kaplan.
it's actually Leslie Smith. I am under Ann for some
Okay,
reason.
Les, what do you got?
I just wanted to elaborate on leaving NAR because I thought a lot about it.
Yep.
And if GBAR, MAR, and NAR are our union and we all break up our union, the only people that are going to benefit from that are Redfin and Zillow, in my opinion. And I think it would give them a huge advantage. And
Well,
then
I don't. Again, I speak out of school sometimes. I don't think the Greater Boston Real Estate Board is going away ever. We've been around since 1889, and we provide beneficial things to you. One is we provide your forms. Two, we provide the broker's counseling line. And three, we do local advocacy. We do that independently of NAR or MAR. And so I don't see that set of tools ever going away for you, even if NAR ends up imploding on themselves because of all the current issues, which I don't see happening. But even if they do, I think tools are going to be there for you in the future in order to help you with your business, regardless of what the outcome. John, did you want to announce the education thing that we're rolling out? I assume you know what I'm talking about.
I do, except it still needs to meet board
With
of
the board of
directors
directors,
approval,
needs to get to the BOD. Yeah.
what I'll briefly say to you all is that the board of directors and the leadership team of the association have been looking very closely at ways we can enhance the value of membership. And to that end, the board has approved a partnership with Safe Showings to provide a safety app for all members as part of their membership that will be rolling out in November. We also have going to the board of directors this month a recommendation to introduce a new agent training. I shouldn't say it's not for new agents. It's an agent training video library that would be available before year's end if that is approved as an additional training tool. And then Sandy and her team are rolling out new agent training, so training for new agents, series of courses that will launch in January of next year.
I'm pretty confident our board of directors will move forward this video library. Beverly, I'm going back to your comments. There's a couple hundred short videos on all kinds of issues, how to address buyer compensation, how to respond to a seller saying, you know, your commission's too high, how to justify your commission, how to explain all kinds of issues. And I think it's a great library, and I'm pretty confident our BOD will enter into an agreement with this company because I think it has a lot of value. But again, that won't be rolled out until next year sometime. But we have time for one more question. Marilyn Kaplan. Kaplan, tell me how to say your first name.
Hi, it's Maria Elena, but I just go
Maria
by
Elena. I love that. Maria Elena. How
but I
can I
just
help
go,
you?
but I just go by Lena, so you can call me Lena.
Lena, you're our last speaker, so make it good.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room. So we can always talk about how to justify our value and what we do, but when you're working with first-time home buyers or you're working with cash-strapped buyers and you reject the compensation, you ask the seller to pay it, and the seller won't, or they'll only pay a real small portion, then what are your suggestions with how do we handle that?
Well, first of all, the elephant in the room is usually me. So let me address that piece. I see some smiles and laughs. Thank you. Thank you. You know what, Liana, it's going to happen. I mean, I can't tell you that in every scenario it's not going to happen. But what I can tell you is, unless the seller has multiple offers from multiple people and all of them, they don't have to pay the buyer's compensation, I think your buyer's still going to be able to hang in there and get the property. It's part of the transaction. Let's just face it, that, you know, we could say it's not, but you don't work for free. You don't work for 1 cent on the dollar. And sellers need to understand that. And listing agents understand that too. You know, the buyer's agent has a function and a purpose, and they need to be compensated through the transaction. And while we say you're paying it, seller, it's an accounting entry. The buyer is the one who puts every dollar on the table. You know, I've been drilling that since I met Dick Carlson in the late 1990s. The buyer puts it, all monies come through the transaction. And the buyer puts all that money on the table. And in return, they get the house. So the seller doesn't want them to have that house. Yeah, they can say no. The sellers only hurt themselves in their sale. They're not hurting the buyer's agents. They're hurting the ability to sell the property. And I don't imagine that there are listing agents out there saying, yeah, you can reject every buyer agent compensation, but someone will still buy a house. Hello? Especially if it's in the low income arena, which you set up your question in. If you're not going to pay it, no one's going to buy your house in the low income. You know, you have a $14 million home in Lexington or Marblehead, those buyer agents are going to be able to get the money from the buyers. If you're on the low end of the scale and you don't want to pay anything, you're never going to sell your house. I mean, does that make sense to you? I see you not.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So anyway, we are at 2:31. Corey, quickly, what do you got? Corey, demute.
Yeah, I'm sorry, demuted. So I guess that was the thing. The last comment that you just said is that I've heard from other meetings so far prior to this one is we're not allowed to tell the seller you can't. It's not in your best interest to not offer compensation because no one will show your house or buyers won't be able to afford to buy.
Well, I get it, Corey, but I didn't say it that way, did I? I didn't say no one will sell your house, did I? I said, again, it's logistics and language. You got to learn language to say, seller, the system works like this. And if you don't want to offer out any compensation whatsoever, that's fine. Hopefully, we'll get a buyer's agent who will come in and bring a buyer to us. But more likely than not, guess what? They're going to ask for compensation. So it's eventually going to come to the transaction. When I used to practice, I offered two amounts to buy sellers. I offered X amount of dollars without me being paid and X amount of dollars with me being paid. And I would go through the process of saying the buyer wants to finance their amount through the transaction, and this is how much it's going to cost. And we're going to pay you 500 and 5,000 instead of 500 because they're going to finance that 5,000 through the transaction.
Right. Okay. I like what you said the second time better than what you said the first time, because the first time sounded a lot more like what I was told we weren't supposed to say.
Well,
That
I
we weren't
apologize
supposed to
for
make
that.
them fearful that
Yeah.
their houses wouldn't be sold.
Sure, I would never have said it that way, but you're 100% correct. You can't say it that way, and nor should you say it that way.
Right. Because then it makes
but
them fearful they can't sell their
More than
house.
one way to skin a cat, as you've heard. So
Mhm.
again, I don't know who it was, Elizabeth, or who it was originally said, Beverly, communication. How you communicate to the buyers and or sellers, the words you use have meaning. And you've got to come up with your spiels, what you say, how you say it, that doesn't violate process. So saying to a seller, no one will show you a house if you don't offer all compensation. Wrong, wrong, wrong. This is how the system works. There's a better chance that you will sell quicker and for your price if you offer out some compensation, but it's not mandatory. But I'll tell you right now, seller, I doubt we will get one offer where someone will not be asking you to pay the monies through the transaction. The buyer's giving you the money to do it, to pay it. They're not saying I'm going to pay you 500,000, but you have to pay out 550,000. They're saying I'm going to pay you 550, and you pay my buyer's agent fee. All part of the transaction. Start your mindset. If you get nothing out of today's discussion, start your mindset with all monies come through the transaction to pay for everything.
Yep.
You have to believe in that. You have to explain to the consumer that's how this works. I think we went 4 minutes over our time. I have no more questions. I hope that everybody got a little value out of this or picked up a nugget or so of information. And we're going to end our live call for Moving Massachusetts. I'm going to say goodbye.
Bye, Bill. Thank you.
Welcome, welcome, welcome.